Hello friends, Gregg Braden here, and I want to welcome you to this edition of our questions and answers. I want to tell you just how much I really appreciate you sending in the questions so that I can answer them. All of the questions that come to us either directly through the emails or our social media, as well as the questions that are coming in the comment section in the videos that we're posting on this YouTube channel. My staff and I work to read those questions. We read all the questions, we read all the comments, and when we see those questions, we do our very best to answer them. And often what happens is there are many questions, but they're really asking the same question using different words. And I have a wonderful staff that helps me to collate those and direct those to me so that I can answer those for you here in these programs. This particular question I'm going to answer today, I've got two of them, and they're kind of related. They're about human evolution. And if you've read any of my work, you know that I love to talk about human evolution and where the evidence is leading us and what the evidence is telling us about what we used to believe in the past. So I'm going to get right to it. This first question is from Anita. And Anita, I'll read her question. She says, Greg, I was interested in determining what you think about a message given in 2010 by Dr. Francis Collins, someone who perhaps directed or worked closely on the Human Genome Project in 2003. So I'll stop right there. The project, the Human Genome Project, was the first attempt to map our genetic makeup. It began in 1990 and it ended, and the announcements were made in 2003. And Francis Collins was one of the visionaries that led this. I have a lot of respect for this man. He's done some amazing work. Don't necessarily agree with all of his conclusions, but I have a lot of respect for him as a man. So she gave me a video to watch, a link to a video, and I will put that link in the comment section below so you can see this video as well. So then the question, here comes the question. In this video, Dr. Collins states that he believes the human genome provides proof that Darwin's theory of evolution was correct and still stands. So she's asking what I think about that. So let me talk a little bit first about the Genome Project itself and what was driving this. Before the Human Genome Project, there was a belief in the life sciences, in biology, that it took one gene to program each protein in the human body. And because there are approximately 100,000 proteins, give or take, the thinking was if it takes one gene to create each of those, that we would have about 100,000 genes. And the implications for that were vast. The pharmaceutical companies believed that if they could isolate those 100,000 genes, that they could create products that could target each of those individual genes. There's 100,000 new products. And in terms of disease and what it means for longevity and for, I mean, everything from cancers to diabetes to, whatever is happening in the human body, the thinking was it could be addressed through understanding the map of these genes. What happened surprised everyone. Because at the end of the Genome Project, it was discovered that the human body only has about 20 to 25,000 genes. That's not just a little mistake. That's not just a small margin of error. That is a magnitude, several magnitudes of difference from what was believed to be happening. And what it told the researchers was that something about their theory was wrong. And what they discovered is that it's not a one-to-one correspondence. It's not one gene for every protein. Individual genes have the ability to program different proteins. This is where epigenetics comes from. It is the environment that determines how the gene expresses and what proteins it creates. Some genes can create many proteins. And when I say environment, it can be the external environment or the world around us. So, those are toxins in the environment, can downregulate genes, and harmful UV radiation or radiation from a nuclear power plant or, those kinds of things. But perhaps the most powerful environment is not outside of us, it's inside of us. It is the thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs. Stress is a powerful epigenetic factor. that can upregulate or downregulate these genes. So with only 20 to 25,000 genes, we can program that 100,000 plus number of proteins that allows us to be who we are. That was a big deal, and scientists don't like to talk about that very much because it means everything they were teaching up until 2003 was based on this one gene for one protein principle. It was wrong. It was wrong, and it was hard for them to admit that. So I want to say that just about the Genome Project in general. It's amazing because it told us where we were wrong, and it opened the door to a powerful possibility of self-regulation because we have the ability to change our own epigenetics. And I talk about that in other programs. So specifically, I watched a video, and it's a little tricky. And this is something that comes into play for a lot of advocates when it comes to Darwin's theory. Because what this video was all about was the efficacy of evolution in general. And I'm just going to say to you straight up, as a scientist, I'm a degreed geologist. I believe in evolution. I support evolution. Evolution is a fact. I have seen it in the fossil records. I've seen it in insects preserved in amber and fluorescent Colorado. I have seen it in marine life. I've seen it in plants. I've seen it in animals. So I have no problem with the theory of evolution to explain certain forms of life. Here's where the issue comes in. Darwin's theory of evolution breaks down when it comes to humans, when it comes to us. And I've done a number of videos on this, and I don't want to rehash all of those, but I'll just encapsulate the highlights. Scientists are pretty much in agreement, well, they were in agreement that we appeared upon this earth about 200,000 years ago. A recent discovery has now pushed that date back to about 300,000 years. So scientists are pretty much in agreement that, let's just say that we humans appeared on earth between 200 and 300 years ago. No controversy around that. The question is, how did it happen? They are in agreement that what are called anatomically modern humans, that's us, and the acronym is AMH. Anatomically modern humans appeared 200 to 300,000 years ago. The issue comes in terms of when we appeared and the way we appeared. We appeared relatively suddenly in the overall scheme of things. We appeared with a brain capacity, a brain size, 50% larger than our nearest primate relative. We appeared with the ability for complex speech in a way that no other form of life and no other primate has. And these capabilities are due to mutations that happened in our genome in a way that cannot be attributed to natural processes. They cannot be attributed to evolution, at least as we know evolution today. Evolution through Darwin's perspective, or from Darwin's perspective, is slow change gradually over long periods of time. Stephen Jay Gould, another evolutionary biologist, put forth the theory of what's called punctuated evolution, where it looks like things aren't happening for a while and then there's a big jump and then nothing happens in the big jump. We don't really fit into any of those, and I want to talk to you a little bit about why that is, and it has to do with the genome. In the human genome, one of our chromosomes is a mysterious chromosome. It's number 2, and it provides, I believe, about a large percentage, I don't know the exact percentage, but a large percentage of the DNA in our nucleus of our genome is this it's the second largest chromosome in the human body. I know that. How chromosome 2 came to be is controversial and it is mysterious. But let me tell you why it's important. There are about 12 to 1,300 genes on human chromosome number 2. I'm going to talk about only one of those genes. It's called TBR2. TBR2 is responsible for the brain size, twice as large as our nearest primate relative is chimps and gorillas and apes, twice as large. It is responsible for about 86% of the neocortex. And the neocortex in the human brain is where we attribute so many of the faculties that give us our humanness, our ability for empathy and sympathy and compassion, our ability to self-regulate our own biology. And so much of our mirror neurons, for example, are in the neocortex. Gene TBR1 is responsible for much of that. And gene TBR1 is the product of something mysterious that happened to create human chromosome number 2. If we didn't have chromosome number 2, we wouldn't be here. Now, what it is that happened to create human chromosome 2, this is where the mystery comes in. You've probably heard of telomeres. Some people pronounce them telomeres. The protective caps on the end of the chromosomes, so that each time a cell divides, that's a traumatic experience for the chromosome. And the telomeres take the hit of that trauma rather than the vital DNA information below the telomeres. So if you're going to have a cell division and a part of the DNA does not make that split, you don't want that to be a vital piece of information that programs your immune system or your circulatory system or something like that. So the way that we are made is that the telomeres will be the portions that don't make the cut, and all the vital DNA inside does. Those telomeres are on the ends of the chromosomes. So I'm saying this to you because in human chromosome 2, not only are telomeres on the ends of the chromosomes, they're also in the middle. And they are in the middle at a pinch point where scientists now know that 2 previously existing fully intact chromosomes fused together. So 2 pre-existing chromosomes fused together, and the fusion, where the telomeres used to be on the ends, they're now in the middle. But that's not where it ends. After that fusion occurred, there were genes that were silenced, is a term that's used when the genes are no longer active. There were genes that appeared to be removed, genes that appeared to be inserted to stabilize the fusion and to take away the redundancy. When you think about this, if there were 2 fully intact chromosomes, they were each doing their own thing, and all the functions were there. When you fuse them together, there is an overlap in function. There's a redundancy, and you don't want that. You don't want them working against one another. So there was a process where certain genes were either removed or they were silenced or some others were activated. All of this happened in a very short period of time. Now, we know of nothing in nature that provides or allows for this kind of a fusion. Now, I want to be really clear on this because I know biologists are watching this. We do see a fusion of chromosomes in nature, and it's actually more common than you would think. However, the way that happens is a chromosome. So here, this pin is a chromosome, and the telomeres are the shiny places on the end. And every once in a while, something will happen and a chromosome will break in nature. It could be high UV radiation. It could be environmental toxins. For humans, it can be bad drugs. This was a problem in Woodstock, 1969. The acid, the LSD, was bad acid. And one of the things, one of the byproducts of bad acid is it can break chromosomes, which is not good if you're going to have children. You don't want to be, conceiving with broken chromosomes in the mix. So it was a big deal. People were talking about it a lot. So there are times where human chromosomes will break. And what happens is when they break, they will fuse at those break points. So the telomeres are still on the ends. There's no telomeres in the middle, and they'll fuse at those break points. That's not what happened to you and me. What is responsible for us, one of the things, is that there was the 2 pre-existing fully functional chromosomes that fused and then were modified after the fusion in a way that cannot be explained through natural processes. All right, that's one thing. Now, as strange as that is, if that was the only thing that happened, or as rare as that is, you could say, wow, that it's a fluke, but it happened. It's not the only mutation that happened. At the same time, there was another mutation that was happening in chromosome number 7. The result of that mutation gave us the ability for complex speech. It's the reason that chimpanzees cannot sing, and apes and gorillas cannot sing, but humans do. For over 75 million years, this chromosome, these genes in chromosome 7, they were stable. All right, and all of a sudden, there was a little, just this little switch in the DNA letters. You've seen the letters in what's called the genetic alphabet, C, T, A, G, that are abbreviations for the components that make up the DNA. There was a little switch in 2 of those letters that connected our tongue and the muscles in our jaw and the part of our brain that allows for complex speech and singing that happened only to us. It didn't happen to any other mammals, no other primates. It only happened to humans. And here's the kicker. It happened at exactly the same time, that 200 to 300,000 year range, when chromosome 2 was also fused together when humans emerged. So when we emerged, we were fully enabled and fully intact with the potential and the capabilities that we have today. They did not develop slowly, gradually over a long period of time. I did not see Francis Collins address that, and it's difficult to address that. What he did address was evolution in support of Darwin's theory for life in general, and I fully support that. Because whatever we were, we inherited the DNA of those earlier forms of life. So yes, there is Darwin's evolution that played a role in the genetic makeup that led up to 200 or 300,000 years ago. But something happened 200 or 300,000, between 200 and 300,000 years ago that cannot be explained by Darwin's theory of evolution that precipitated the emergence of the first anatomically modern human. And that something is a mystery. That something is, along with the miscalculations in the genome, those are 2 things that I didn't see Francis Collins address in this particular video. Just to give you an idea, if you're a statistician, scientists say that the odds, when the odds of something occurring are 10 to the 400th power, so 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 400 times. If the odds of something occurring are 10 to the 400th, scientifically that is said to be impossible. Those are considered to be impossible odds. If you had a lottery ticket and the chances of that lottery ticket being a winning ticket were 10 to the 400th, I wouldn't spend much time on that. Scientists have calculated now that the odds of our genome in general forming and chromosome 2, the way it is formed as part of that the odds of that happening are 10 to the 600th. If 10 to the 400th is impossible, 10 to the 600th is more than impossible. It's more than impossible that we're the product of random mutations, natural selection resulting from Darwin's theory. All right, and I think the evidence supports that statement, and I stand by that statement. I've written entire books. I have a book entitled Human by Design that is describing in much more detail everything I'm saying to you right now. The book was retitled by my publisher. The Science of Self-Empowerment is the new title. I prefer Human by Design, and I will always think of it as Human by Design because that's the name I gave it when I wrote it. But they wanted to emphasize the self-help aspect of what the book says. Now I understand, that for, that's the market that they're looking for is the self-help market. So the point is, if we are not the product of natural selection and random mutations, then what are we the product of? And this is what opens the door to a very empowering conversation. As a scientist, what I'm going to say to you is scientifically, we do not know. Now, we have theories, we have opinions, we have intuition. Scientifically, we do not know. And the reason we do not know is because the scientific community is reluctant to follow the evidence to the story that it tells. Rather, they are very emphatic that they want to take the new discoveries, the new evidence, and force it into a pre-existing story that is called Darwin's theory of evolution, when in fact there's room for both. It doesn't have to be either or. Yes, Darwin's theory of evolution describes life in general and processes within life. Not 100%, there's some problems, but I think it does. It's the best that we have. It does a good job. I am not anti-evolution. However, I am adamant that something breaks down in the evolutionary story 200 to 300,000 years ago when it comes to us. We're the product of something, and as a scientist, I can only say this. It appears that we're the product of an intervention, an intelligent intervention. Some people call it a divine intervention that took the pre-existing forms of life, the most advanced pre-existing forms of life that existed at that time, and catapulted us light years beyond that. How that happened and who we attribute that to, that's a whole different that'd be another video. It's a whole different conversation, but you can see where religion comes in, because religion picks up with that intervention. Religion picks up with some kind of what is called a divine intervention, and that is one perspective of looking at this. Scientists aren't going to go after that, but they are now finding that they are at a dead end. And the only way to break the impasse is they have to follow the evidence. Who or what is responsible for us? Now, this is where, as a scientist, I have to leave the conversation. So what I'm going to say to you is not me as a scientist. It is me with informed speculation. So I will use my informed speculation as well as some research that I have done as well. There are multiple, I think there are multiple explanations. One of those explanations is that we are related, as many of us suspect, to intelligence that permeates this cosmos that we simply have not been made aware of in recent history. And that theory is supported culturally, almost universally. Every indigenous tradition, well, I will say this, every indigenous tradition that I've ever studied, I have not studied every indigenous tradition on the planet, but everywhere from the highlands of central China and Tibet and the monks and the nuns and the mystics in Nepal and India, all through the American desert Southwest and the indigenous First Peoples traditions, all the way with the time that I've spent in the Andes Mountains of Peru and on to the Altiplano of Bolivia, and their traditions, the Aboriginal traditions, the traditions that we find throughout Africa, every one of those says to us that we are related to an intelligence beyond the physical planet that we live on. And I'm going to say it another way, not one of those traditions says that we're the product of random mutations. Not one. So that's culturally. Now, you may say that's not science, and that is a perspective, but that's culturally. Now, archaeologically, in the last 5 years, a growing number of archaeological remnants are being discovered, and I'm consulting on some of these projects, both as a geologist as well as a linguist, to understand what the script on these artifacts is telling us. But a growing number of artifacts are depicting our relationship with a cosmic intelligence. So they are depicting births that are coming from relationship between the people of this world and people of wherever that world is from. I had the opportunity in the 1990s to tour, the privilege of touring with Zecharia Sitchin before he passed. He was a brilliant man, brilliant scholar. We did not agree 100% on the conclusions of what he found in the Sumerian tablets, the Sumerian texts. But the ancient Sumerian texts, if you're familiar with Sitchin's work, depict an interaction between us and cosmic beings. Now, Sitchin's perspective was that we were created as a race of slaves to work for a higher intelligence. While I suspect that we may have been enslaved at times in our ancient history, I firmly believe that's not the purpose. It's not the reason that we were created. And I think the evidence certainly supports that. But the point is that archaeological evidence is depicting this relationship that would support some kind of an intervention. So now we've got cultural evidence, we've got archaeological evidence. The fossil evidence has never supported Darwin's idea of evolution for humans. It does support the idea when you look at the evolutionary family tree and you see the lines connecting, Australopithecus and, Lucy and the Lewis Leakeys and all the work that they did. Those are all solid lines connecting all those ancient forms of life. If you look closely, go to the Smithsonian map and you can see this. Modern humans, AMH, are connected to those through a dashed line. And if you look at the legend, what the dashed line will say is that these are speculative or inferred relationships. It means we think that they're there, that we just haven't found the evidence to support them. Darwin put forth his theory in 1859, after 150 plus years. If we were, it's been over 100 years, if we were on the right track to find the evidence supporting Darwin's theory, I think we would be further along than we are right now. We've had the best minds, the greatest scientists, the greatest sums of money, the greatest technology ever existing to help us to support Darwin's theory. And what it does, and this is where it gets tricky because there's nuance. It validates Darwin's theory for life in general, and I fully support that. It doesn't support our emergence 200 to 300 years ago. Something happened that cannot be explained by Darwin's theory. That is what I think Francis Collins did not address. If he did address it, I apologize, and he didn't address it clearly. I didn't see that clearly. So he talked more about life in general. And I think he's a deeply spiritual man. And he was looking for the middle ground just because this is happening. And this is where so many people fall. They say if it's not evolution, then it's got to be religion. I believe there's a middle ground. I think there's something that's not being accounted for. And that something is the intervention that happened in a way that perhaps we are the product of. And as we develop our potential, as we develop the untapped potentials within us, I think those potentials will lead us to the deep truth of the answer of who are we and where did we come from. So I went a little longer than I thought, so I'm going to close this session of the Q&A right here, and I hope, Anita, I hope this answers your question a little bit, and maybe it opens the door to even deeper questions. Because this whole conversation is being pushed by the transhuman movement or the transhumanism movement. The desire to replace aspects of the human body with artificial intelligence and with robotics, ultimately with the goal of immortality. And to do that, the only way that we can do that is that we must compromise our natural abilities. When we replace neurons with computer chips, for example, we replace natural blood with artificial chemicals, what happens is our natural abilities begin to atrophy and they die off, they disappear. Brain cells will die off, parts of the brain stop functioning. The research papers are very clear on this. This is the drawback of the transhuman movement that very few people are talking about. It is being, I am doing entire videos on this, so there's more to come. But the ability to augment our natural biology with technology is being made to look very sexy, very hip in mainstream media. And to young people that don't know any better and don't know any difference, and who have been conditioned to believe that we are a flawed species by virtue of our existence. This is what is taught, that carbon-based life is flawed and we are a flawed species. And that the only way that we can be healthy in our bodies and successful in life is by embracing artificial intelligence, computer chips in our brain, sensors in our skin, chemicals in our blood. That thinking is driving this transhumanism movement. The problem is that if we embrace it wholesale and recreationally, I mean, there are applications for all this that are beautiful applications for someone who's lost the use of a limb in battle in Afghanistan or in Iraq or in a car accident, to be able to have a computer chip in the brain and use the prosthetic to hold your child or to brush your own teeth or fix your own meal. I mean, what a beautiful thing. But wholesale adoption of transhuman technology holds the potential of forever taking away from us the very essence of our humanness. And we need to come to terms with that, and we can't do that until we know who we are and what it is that we're giving away. We haven't even begun to tap the potential of what it means to be fully human. And I will dedicate the rest of my life to doing my very best to share that potential and bring it forward as I come to understand it on deeper and deeper levels. And I know that other people are doing the same thing. So I wanted to say that, Anita, as we close this part of our Q&A. Thank you for the question. Thank you all for sharing part of your day with me today. And I look forward to our next Q&A.